Hello, my name is Michelee Tynes. I am a journalist, I am an author, I'm a teacher. You can find my book. I actually have a copy here today. Hey, got some people here. You can find my book, Taming the Beast of Anxiety, on Amazon. Make sure you purchase your copy today. The interesting thing about me is I use my own book. I practice what I preach, y'all. So very soon, Laura is going to be joining me. We've been having just such a great thing going on here. So many amazing conversations. Actually, I'm recording on my own personal account as well. So I'm just experimenting, trying dual things. I would like to let you know that our previous episodes can be found on YouTube. So find my YouTube channel and there's Laura. Make sure you search Michelee Tynes on YouTube and Amazon. Buy that book, y'all. I use it myself. I wouldn't request that you purchase it unless I did. So let's see. I'm not sure if I did the connection. This confuses me sometimes. Let's see here. Trying to get Laura on. Sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties here. Oh, definitely didn't want to do that, y'all. Don't want you to see my house. Oh, it wouldn't be an Instagram Live if there weren't some technical difficulties. Trying to see how I can get Laura on. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Laura, if you could send me a request, that would be really helpful because I can't seem to figure this out right now. To everyone who's on, thank you for your patience. Okay, well, I'm just going to talk until she comes back on. Our topics that we're going to be discussing today are reverse racism. This is really weird. This has never happened before. Never. There she is. You see that? Sent a request to be in your live video. There we go. There we go. She's here. Thank goodness she's here. I hate technical difficulties, but I think I managed. I did okay, don't you think? Hey! I had trouble connecting. And I'm sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It was so weird. I was like trying to request, but I don't think it actually, I don't know. I have no idea what happened, but.
Me either. And I baby panicked. I was like, I need my Laura. Where's my Laura? Oh.
Well, we figured it out. I had
know.
to like, just close all my apps for a little bit and then try to her, but I'm here.
Yay! So how are you?
Pretty good actually. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I don't know if I told you I was in quarantine for a little bit.
No, I did not know this.
Yeah,
I didn't know this.
Back from the States, Canada has a rule that you have to quarantine for 14 days. And today, actually yesterday, was my first day out of quarantine, like physically out of the house. So really nice to actually like walk around and like, see like nature and things out of the house. It was like, wow, it's a whole world out here.
It's a whole different world, my friend. So are you in Canada or in the United States? You're in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going kind of back and forth, just like trying to move stuff. But I'm officially back in Canada for now.
I know, right? For now.
Yeah. So we'll see what the future holds.
So that's pretty amazing because you didn't catch the COVID
No,
throughout the whole process.
no, I didn't. Or
Yeah.
I could have and just never showed symptoms.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think I did.
I know. So tell everyone your name and a little bit about what you do. I just always like to make sure that everybody knows who we are.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Laura, and I run the Mind Health Spot on Instagram. I'm currently a graduate student studying clinical psychology, and it's actually my summer right now, so I'm in between years.
Nice.
And one thing that I'm really passionate about is bringing in culture and cultural awareness and being kind of culturally humble and informed into mental.
Yes.
And so that definitely culture relates to race and relates to ethnicity, but just different facets of that. And yeah, I'm just super grateful to have this chat with you,
I
Michelee.
know. Me
Like
too.
incorporate both of our unique perspectives into this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I love that. I love that. So I'm doing something interesting today. I'm also doing a live from my personal account.
Ooh. Wait,
So I'm always
doing that.
trying to do some different things at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm only responding to the comments here. So make sure that if you have a question, we would love you to use the question box, but we love your comments too.
Hmm.
But I'm just always trying something new. So that's a great way to include that audience in what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
last week we talked a little bit about reverse racism, and we also were talking about how to communicate or respond to others who say things that are racist and damaging. That's a huge
Mhm.
one. Maybe we start with reverse racism. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
Okay, let's
It's
do
a
it.
super important topic because there's lots of confusion around this.
Yes, there is.
So, yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think you sent me a video a couple of weeks ago about a comedian that was talking about this exact topic, and he
Yes.
explained it so brilliantly. Do you remember? Do you mind
Was
explaining?
it I hope I say his name right. Was it Fuchs? Was he talking about his black son dealing with autism and the police? Was it that one?
No, I don't think so.
Oh no, I remember which one you're talking about, and I will include a link in the description box. I take
Yeah.
notes now, so I will definitely, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah, and I thought it was brilliant because I think it takes such a complicated and such a like sometimes it's hard to understand for people. And the way that he does it, he makes comedy into kind of yeah, he utilizes comedy to explain a pretty tricky topic.
Yes,
I think is such a wonderful thing, right? It makes it more accessible for people to really understand and incorporate in their lives. But yeah, let's just kind of start off. Do you
yes.
want to kind of talk about what reverse racism is, or just like what people think it is?
I will, but I always, as you know, believe in transparency. I'm not an expert, and my even knowledge of this topic is not that extensive, but I will say it seems like something that people toss around when they're uncomfortable. And
Yeah,
I think if we could introduce into the dialogue and the discussion, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable dealing with this topic. I'm uncomfortable with what we're talking about, but I want to learn. If
yeah,
we could learn to say that, I think that would settle a lot of all of these different things that we get ourselves into, which ends up being sometimes arguments that are fueled on raw emotion. Emotion is a good thing, but raw emotion cannot inform a decision nor a conversation. So
yeah,
we have to be careful about that. I will
yeah,
say reverse racism has been something that has been brought up when people talk about affirmative action. It has been brought up when people talk about reparations. I saw a comment that, well, Black people have already gotten reparations anyway because they're on welfare, they get affirmative action, they do X, Y, and Z. But anyone can read the statistics. Black people are not the focus group for getting welfare.
yeah,
I believe the focus group for getting welfare is white folks. So it is not Black people, though. Black people are not the majority of people who are on welfare.
yeah,
Um, so when we talk about reverse racism, what we're saying is that somebody was racist, somebody who's Black or a person of color was racist against a white person, is what my understanding is. Now,
mhm,
there are some Black people who say that can't possibly happen because Blacks do not have the power structure that's necessary for things such as systemic racism.
Yeah.
Um, However, there can still be, shall I say, racist-ish actions.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Racist.
Like there are still things I believe, um, and I just know one day somebody's gonna call me a sellout. I can feel it. I can feel it in my bones, but I don't care. There are times when Black people can be not racist but prejudiced. See, we,
Yeah.
we need to understand our terminology.
Yeah.
Prejudiced against white people. For instance, my best friend is white and she has cerebral palsy, and her son, when he started, getting an attraction towards girls and everything, he was only like 12 or 13. It was so sweet. He invited a little girl to go out on a date, and she was a
Right.
little Black girl, and that girl's mother refused, like flat out refused. And my little godson's heart was broken. He was crushed, because it was specifically because he was white. So
Yeah.
those types of things are prejudice actions,
Mhm.
and we need to learn to determine the difference. I believe, a lot of times people complain about semantics. It's not semantics, it's vocabulary. We need to
Yeah.
understand. We need to calm ourselves down and settle ourselves down and determine which word best describes what it is we're talking about.
Totally. Yeah. I 100% agree with you. I think that it's so important to really discriminate what is prejudice and what is racism. And I think you're so right. You're so bang on. There is such a thing as prejudice against white people. There is such a thing as discrimination against white people. And it exists. A lot of people are aware of it, and a lot of people complain about it and talk about it, and point it out. But I think what you said back when you were talking about systemic racism, I think that's something that's the key, in what's missing here. Systemic racism,
Yes.
the power dynamic between
Yes.
different races. I think it's important for people to understand that racism is an ism. It ends in ism, which
Yes.
in its very definition means that it has to be structural, right? Similar,
Yes.
like
Good
all
point.
other systems out there, like feminism, for example, like ableism. um,
Yes.
they involve power dynamics and they involve systems of oppression.
Yes.
And systemically, white people have not been oppressed on a systems level, socioeconomically, in healthcare. I mean, white people have,
Everywhere.
I could be wrong about this, but I don't think white people have been enslaved by people of color before. And
That's
that's a
a good
level.
question because I honestly don't know. Another thing to research.
Yeah, yeah.
We
And
always have
I'll just
something to talk about, don't we?
this. I love sometimes me and you, we talk and we're like, oh yeah, we don't know this, but we're kind of
I
saying.
know.
And
Mhm.
then immediately after, sometimes after our chats, I'll just go and like Google these things.
Right.
I feel like I learned so much from these
Me
chats.
too.
From
Me
you.
too.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to that point, I just don't think that it's possible to be racist to a people group that have not been systemically oppressed in society.
Right.
I think it's definitely possible to be like individually discriminatory or
I
prejudiced.
love that.
Exactly what you said. But yeah, we really have to understand what racism really means.
I love that individually discriminatory. And I will say that all of that brilliance of determining the difference between prejudice and racism came right here in this moment. I
Mm.
feel like that's why I say that the importance of the dialogue can never be ignored. My opportunity to sit and talk with you with this allows both of us to formulate how we're going to deal with these types of
Yeah.
situations in the future. How will I speak about it? What will I say? And then when you said, individually discriminatory, as a teacher, I feel like that's something that we can learn to put in our toolbox. That's something we can put in our toolbox, in terms of what we're going to say and how we're going to react to things.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because I'd love to get your take since you're a teacher. And I think I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen how you teach, but from what I know from you and our conversations, I feel like you're so good at explaining things, and you're so good at being patient with people, and you're so good
Yeah.
at information in such an
Yeah.
effective and compassionate way.
Hmm.
So I guess, how would you explain to maybe a student or just someone in general, if they were believing in like reverse racism, or if they even had like implicit racial biases that they were expressing?
This is a difficult topic. This is just, first of all, in so many areas, dialogue is closed. When we talk about gender issues, when we talk about when we talk about issues concerning men and women, when we talk about um, generational issues, parent, child issues, there is so much that we are not saying. We
Mhm.
don't even start the conversation. So
Yeah,
in response to that, it's like, who's going to come up to me and ask, am I a victim of reverse racism? Or Michelee, I feel what you did to me was reversely racist. Nobody's going to say that. You know what I'm saying? Because our culture is supposedly so open, but we're so closed off. We're literally like in
yeah,
so many areas, we're closed off.
yeah,
So the thing is, it would have to be presented to me first, which is why what I'm saying to you, what I've said over the course of these shows that we've done is that this is my life mission. This is my life work. You know what I'm saying?
wonderful.
I can't say, why don't they ever have people sit down and talk with a person of another race from another country about these issues so that we can make some headway in how we think, feel, and believe about it. I am the they. Laura, you're the they. Whoever you are watching, you're the they. There
Yeah.
is no they. Nobody's going to come to save us. So I have never had anybody present that to me, but I will
Mhm.
say there are some conversations I'm going to have going back to work. I don't know if the educational model is going to be more hybrid or exactly what's going to happen, but there are some things that I'm going to need to say, and I'm trying to figure out, am I going to make a video? Because that's one thing that happens. The conversation gets started in raw emotion, and then people interrupt each other, and they end up being mad and
Yeah.
disliking one another. um
Yeah.
so that's the thing is, I feel like in order for anybody to deal with it, they have to first, you have to be able to identify it first, and then
Hmm.
you have to acknowledge that it plays a role in your life.
Yeah.
A little bit later, I'm going to talk about, I sent you a video of Educators for Justice. And there's some things that I want to talk about later concerning, racism in education and how it is so under the radar and people sometimes don't even recognize it. But
Yeah.
first, I mean, in order to answer your question, like, where is this conversation going to take place?
Mhm.
Maybe administrators can call an assembly, but that's still people. There's a linear conversation. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Even
Right.
you and I, it looks like a linear conversation, but it's not, because we're always including the comments and the questions of everybody else.
Hmm.
So I honestly, I mean, I have to be honest, I don't have a good answer for that question. What do
Yeah.
you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I did a little bit of work with kids, a little bit of teaching and a little bit of work in like the mental health sphere with kids. And
Hmm.
what I love about kids is that kids are so inquisitive, and
Yeah.
oftentimes they're not shy if they want to ask questions, and they're not scared. Maybe this kind of disappears over age, but oftentimes, like, young kids are not scared about how they might seem when they ask that question, or, oh, is anyone going to be like offended by this, or, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Whereas I think as adults, we are. And going back to like the fear that you were talking about, how certain things
Yeah.
won't get said, even though I feel like a lot of us are aware of these things, but we don't want to bring these conversations into our workplaces. We don't want to bring the conversation into our schools, even into our families, because we're scared of, because they're really heated conversations. They can
They
get
are.
conversations, right?
Yes.
But what I love about kids is that they just want to know, like they just want
Exactly.
knowledge.
Yes.
And so I think the most effective thing, as you said, like, open conversation. It has to be two ways. And I really see this like, I'm getting flashbacks back to like when I used to work with kids and I would teach kids. And then afterwards, we'd kind of have like a work period where I would just go to the kids and, just talk about some of the stuff that we had
Right.
talked about, but in a more like two-way fashion, right?
Hmm.
Where they're working on something and they have questions to ask, or you're just holding like an open dialogue where you say like, okay, we're going to talk about this thing now. Let's ask questions about it and
Right.
invite dialogue. And you hit
Right.
it
Invite dialogue.
and over again. What's so valuable about these conversations is that it's a conversation. It's a conversation like across borders, like between
Hmm.
me, across races, across generations. And I think that's so valuable.
Hmm.
The more we talk, the more we understand the other person's point of view, and the more we can learn and realize that just because I exist in the world in one way, maybe in like a privileged way, or maybe a way where I can talk about like my Asian Canadian experience, doesn't mean that everyone is
Yes,
in the world like that.
exactly. So true.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to somebody who's on right now. His name is Mountaineer Bigger. And actually, okay, there's always so much for us to talk about, Laura, but you had a post a few weeks ago about suicide,
Mm.
and myths concerning suicide, and that was very crucial. I'll be going into detail on that on another show. I promise. I'll take notes. But he and I were actually, I've been in search for a friend of mine online who said that she was going to commit suicide, said she was going to starve herself in front of a particular building. And so I actually reached out to him looking for this friend. And he just loves her. He lives in Iran, you know, and he just loves her. Never been to the United States. So that's part of who I am as a person. I'll be the one to reach out to you wherever you are. Everyone else is not like that. That's one point. Um, the other point is I I always like to see who I'm talking to. So, I'll be like, can we do a quick video call? Because so many scams and so much going on out there.
Yeah.
So he was really embarrassed of his English. And I said, well, you know what? I'm a teacher. How about 5 minutes a day? I have a friend who's from Iran. He's my soul brother. And, how about 5 minutes a day? We do a little Instagram call if I have time. And, and we just practice it, while we're looking for our friend, because the goal is to find our friend. We're
Yeah.
afraid for her. But
Yeah.
so we go on this other excursion along the way. And the sentence I taught him was, God blessed me to find a friend like you to help me with my English. So just those simple words. But my point with all of this is, at some point we have to be brave enough to reach out to another person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that does that, and that's fine. But if you're not the one that does it and somebody reaches out to you, you have to accept that. You
Yeah.
have to accept someone reaching out to you and not see them reaching out to you as, oh my gosh, that's a Black person. My mama always told me about those Black people. I don't know. You can't do that. Or even, that's a white person. My mama said all white people are racist. You have to start breaking out into your own paradigm of what the world exists and how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for me, Instagram is wonderful. Some people hate Instagram and Facebook, but I've been able to meet people from all around the world.
Yeah.
I know Mission Mogul Status is on as well. UK, Canada. I did an interview in India.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as a Black woman living in America every second of my life. I mean, if it comes into a conversation, then it does. But I
Mm-hmm.
also have to realize that's part of my upbringing. I was raised in California, and it's not always so pervasive every second of the day. So I
Yeah.
think we just have to learn how to respect each other. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the communality that's here.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how like there's people watching that are from all different places in the world.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
all different colors. I love how you said we have to get past the discomfort of thinking like, oh, that's a Black person. Like my mom told me about Black people. We have to get
Yes.
past that discomfort, because even sometimes when we feel like we're listening to our gut, and I'm a real believer in listening to our heart and listening to our gut,
Mm-hmm.
trusting in ourselves and trusting what
Mm-hmm.
that tells us. Um,
Right.
and also knowing that we have been conditioned in a way in society where sometimes our gut isn't actually our gut, but it's like it's reflective of how we've been. I mean, I hate the word brainwash, but
But we
how
have, it's true.
influenced by the society that we live in, right? By the media, by the conversations that our families have had, by so many things. So we have to do the brave thing and say, like, oh, I know that this goes against maybe what people have told me, or maybe
Yes.
that I feel like, oh, sometimes I feel, when I see an Asian person, I feel like they're going to give me coronavirus. Like, I need to
Yeah,
actively
that's terrible. Yeah.
that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
really love that, just kind of exploring our own implicit biases and really recognizing the beauty and diversity.
Mm-hmm. And that's the unconscious bias. I think we said we were going to talk about before, and I love your transparency as well. You didn't feel like you had enough knowledge about that, but it's just basically the way the lenses that we see each other through. And sometimes I have to make a decision to take that lens off. Like people have told me things about people from Iran or Iraq or wherever. It's kind of hilarious. I only started saying this because Mountaineer Bigger was like, too fast, slow down, slow down. But we can't always slow down. Life keeps going. It keeps going and it keeps going. So we have to, at some point, as we're rushing about our day, we have to notice the thought that comes into our mind. Well, that person, why am I thinking about that? I love my mom and my dad, but what they taught me, is that really real? Because half the times it's not. They're
Mhm.
doing the best they can too, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So the other thing we talked about was how to communicate or respond to others who say things that are racist or damaging. And obviously, like I said, transparency, that's what Michelee's known for. I have not always done the best with that.
Right.
Sometimes it stings. It catches you in the moment and you're stunned. Like
Mhm.
like I said, my friend that is from Iran, he said that there have been times that people have called him a terrorist. And if that happens, like immediately when I was younger, someone did tell me go back to Africa,
Mhm.
and in the moment you don't have a response planned. And I used to think I had to always have a response planned, and then I'd be pissed off because I didn't have a response on the ready. But it doesn't necessarily go like that.
Mhm.
Now 10, 15, 20 years later, I know if somebody tells me to go back to Africa, then I would say, you go back to your country or you go back to Europe. How about you practice your own? And I'm not from Africa, I'm from here. How about that?
Yeah.
There are a ton of other things that you learn to say with experience.
Mhm.
Another more refined approach might be, well, what makes you think that I originated from Africa?
Mhm.
And what makes you think that you did not originate from Africa? That brings up a couple of questions, actually. If you're going to tell me to go back to Africa, what
Yeah.
makes you think that either of us belong in this country called the United States of America? Because
Mhm.
I am not original people. I am not Native. Well, I do have Native American blood, but I'm not, my presence in this country did not start with those particular people in that way. So,
Totally.
you have to allow yourself to mature to a response, but you also have to be willing to be teachable. Like I said, like I always say, reach out to me, reach out to somebody who's reach outable. Not everybody is, but ask someone so that you can form your question, and you can form your response. But like I'm on here talking about stuff that's been going on, that's been, racist at work. That's been going on for 3 years, 4 years, and I'm only now getting to the point where I'm comfortable enough to say we're going to have to change some things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being patient with yourself as well, I think.
I definitely agree with that. I think that throughout it all, you touched on a really important concept to me personally, and something that's helped my mental health immensely is self-compassion. Uh,
Yes.
I definitely feel like in these times, and even in times before this whole movement, I've definitely witnessed like racism. I've been the target of racism, you know, walking
Hmm.
and being called chink, or like being called like, oh, exotic Chinese princess or whatever. And I've just like stood there stunned because I don't know
Yes.
what to do,
Yeah.
or I've brushed it off and kind of
Yes.
on. I've been I've witnessed microaggressions towards like my friends or just towards people of color in general. And there are times when I've definitely like been in shock and didn't know what to say. And I have to remember to be self-compassionate to
Yes.
myself and
Yes.
really tell myself, you know what? It's okay. You're human. Sometimes
Hmm.
have the perfect response. And I forgive you. Like, I forgive you, Laura, for
Right.
not having those responses because often I find this is just for me personally, I tend to give myself really high expectations of
Yes.
like I claim to be an advocate. I want to work towards being an ally, which means that in every single instance, I need to stand up for racism. I need to stand
Hmm.
up for sexism. I need to stand up, you know, to people being homophobic and things like that.
Right. Hmm.
And then I criticize myself after a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if I don't. So yeah, I think you bring on a really important point of the patience, and yeah, the self-compassion if
Yeah.
you don't. And the fact that it is good if you can utilize those. I don't want to call them mistakes because they're not necessarily mistakes. They're just you being human, but you can utilize those experiences to be better. And as you learn, like over time, you kind of learn like what you want to say
Yes. Yeah.
is, right? And so you use those as a learning experience for the future. And I think that's really, it's hard to do that. Like as
It's so
women,
hard.
to hold that
But
complexity
it
of,
becomes easier though.
yeah, it becomes
Okay,
easy.
shameless plug. In my book, Taming the Beast of Anxiety, that was quick. In my book, I have 7 phases that I have noticed are present with anxiety. And one of those phases was compassion, but it's not that all of them were listed as verbs. So love is a verb.
Mm,
And compassion, like I've said before, I feel like it's equal parts love, patience, and forgiveness. You have to learn to forgive yourself. Also
mm,
in my book, I mentioned it's called the Ho'oponopono prayer. And it is very simple. It says, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I thank you. As soon as you say, I thank you,
yeah.
you give yourself permission to jump to the lesson. We
Hmm.
keep going through the experience over and over and over again in our minds, but we don't give ourselves permission to learn the lesson when we do that. There's a
Yeah.
lesson in all things. There's a
Yeah.
lesson when somebody called me the N word. There's a lesson when somebody picked a white person over me. There's a lesson in all of this. There's a lesson. So when we stay stuck in the pain of the experience, we don't get to learn from the experience.
Hmm.
And yeah, it sounds brilliant, but like I said, I use my own book. I come across this every day too. But
Yeah.
you have to notice when those little creepers start coming into your mind, those little ideas and those little thoughts. Man, you really screwed that up. Man, I should have really let her have it when she called me the N word. And I can't believe, you know, it's it's called rumination, I believe, in
Yeah.
therapy. You just let those thoughts keep cycling. Instead, see them as little tiny monsters and chew them out. Say,
Yeah.
little monster, what did you need from me? Okay, okay, there's the lesson. Okay, you can leave now. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're trapping yourself. We trap ourselves when we do that.
Totally, yeah. And I really like how you brought in like the meaning and the lesson behind some of those things. I think that really touches on, I don't know if you realize this is like essentially what experiential psychology is all about.
Right.
And it basically is this guy, Viktor Frankl, he is a Holocaust survivor. And what happened is he created this theory that's essentially using experiences and suffering as lessons, trying
Yes.
to extract the meaning out of it. And I mean, it works for some people, it doesn't. Sometimes they're just is a really shitty thing that happens, and
It
you're like,
is.
I don't want to see the silver lining in this. And
Right.
okay,
Right.
but I do think something valuable that um, I guess he experienced when he was going through the concentration camps and whatnot is the fact, and you pointed it out so beautifully, that things are trying to teach us something. Um,
Hmm.
so you kind of can use those things as like little stepping stones in your way.
Definitely.
That's so beautiful.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I wanted to mention, I actually referred to Educators for Justice. I believe it was last week, two of their posts. And I just happened to see that they were going live this morning as I was preparing. And I don't have a statistic, but obviously it's well known that most Black children do not ever have a Black teacher. You can go from grades kindergarten through 12th and never see a Black teacher. And that does a lot of things for psyche and self-esteem, efficacy, so many different things that it contributes to your opportunity to have a Black teacher. I had one in fourth grade, Miss Mosey. She was very loving. And then I think the other one that I think of was in college, Professor Johnny Scott. I still talk with him today, but not having a Black teacher impacts several different things. So as I was listening to this, I came up with an idea. And the idea was having a black teacher, or having a teacher that looks like you, is not necessarily important to whites in the same way that it is to Blacks, because they have the dominant culture, so to speak. They
yeah.
have the dominant, at least the dominant operating system. Let's call it the dominant operating system, because quite frankly, if you look at American culture, it really is Black culture. Okay, so the dominant operating system, everybody looks from like them. How many times have I mentioned my mom having to color in those little
Yeah.
children because there were no books representing people like me.
Yep.
So
And
it is important for these reasons. It's important for a Black person to have an educator that looks like them. It's important to see that someone like you understands the subtle nuances of what you're dealing with.
mm-hmm.
Aside from that, it is important for whites to have a Black teacher as well. It's important for all races to have a Black teacher at some point in their career. And I'm drawn to the line in Hamilton: who lives, who dies, who tells your story. We need to own our own narrative.
Mm-hmm.
We get the right to tell our story in our own way, not
Yeah.
from somebody else's perspective, but from my perspective as a Black person.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, I don't know. Sometimes I watch some things and I just have this explosion of thought, and those were my explosions of thought on that. Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah. I really agree with you in that domain. And I think, it's so important. It kind of also extends to like what we're teaching in school. For example, I think it's so important to have people of color and Black teachers, not just people that look like the students, but
Right.
people that represent a diversity of experiences. Like,
Yes.
I can't remember a time that I had an Asian teacher until like I was in like grade 10 or something like that. And I was
Right.
15. And I remember I talked about this in an earlier live in a conversation earlier about how I lived in a dominantly Caucasian community, and I
Mhm.
didn't have any peers or any teachers or any role models that looked like me. And that totally affected my mental health growing up. It totally affected
Yes.
my esteem. But not only that, I think, mental health and self esteem aside, being able to not just affirm your identity as a child, but also teach children through modeling and teaching children through doing, that it's important to not just have one viewpoint be the dominant. And I love how you brought in the dominant, what word did you use? The
The
dominant,
dominant culture, the dominant operating system,
yeah, the dominant,
because it's actually not the dominant culture. It's the
right.
dominant operating system.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And it was interesting. I did a workshop with young girls a couple of weeks ago, and we learned about dominant identities and non-dominant identities, not just in terms of race, but also in terms of religion. Like, okay, what's the dominant religion in America? Just
Right.
the money that America
Right.
has. What's the dominant gender in America?
Yes.
dominant body type or
Yes.
dominant age. All of
I
these things
love that.
are there.
Amazing.
And we need to fight against that and realize that it starts at a really young age with children. So you're
Mhm.
totally right. A white child being exposed to not just Black teachers, but Black history,
Yes.
Black, authors that write about their experiences, artists, TV shows, all of these
Hmm.
things is so important because that's what makes up America. And even if it didn't, it's what teaches people to be tolerant and teaches people to start being anti-racist at a really young age.
Yes. Yes, to even know how to attack that, because it seems like such a huge thing.
Mhm.
But if we all do our part, I feel like we can do it. I
Yeah,
do. I just believe that.
yeah, yeah. And I really think it's so important too, because then, for example, if there's a Black teacher and a white child, and even though it's like a teacher child relationship, that child sees the Black teacher as a human. um,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
why it's so important to start really investigating our friendship circles and really start,
Yes.
okay, what's the diversity in, like, my friendship circles? What's the diversity in the people that I follow on Instagram, for example?
Yeah.
Or music and movies and TV.
Yes.
I had a conversation with one of my best friends, and she this morning, actually, so she's half Jamaican and half
Hmm.
Japanese, and
Wow.
talking about
Wow. That's a
TV
lot.
and movies, and how it wasn't until recently that Black people were acknowledged as just human in the media, like in
Yes.
media.
Exactly.
And there's so many movies out there, depicting slavery. And I think
Hmm.
it's so important, for people to realize how traumatizing and how awful that experience was.
Hmm. How
But
it pervades, how the effects
how
of it pervade our society.
totally, like, how
Hmm.
so pervasive even now today in a lot of people and communities. But that should not be the only message that we should be getting about Black
Hmm.
people. Like,
Hmm.
oh, Black people,
No.
suffered slavery,
Right.
and is kind of like that's their problem kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like, oh, this is
Like, get
something,
over it.
yeah, or like this is something that happened to you guys a long time
Or it
ago.
didn't even happen to you. It happened to your ancestors. But
Yeah.
there
So
are epigenetic after effects that influence DNA. You can look that up. That's not
yeah,
me.
it's a real thing. Yeah, it carries on like up to 14 generations. It's real.
Wow. That's
Um, but I think it also
14 generations.
of like an us versus them mentality of like,
Hmm.
if this happened to like this group of people, that's not me kind of.
Hmm.
And that's why I love shows like, I don't know, I've been watching a show on Netflix called Dear White People. Love it so much
Uh-huh.
because it
Uh-huh.
just picks people of color and Black people, like
Right. Just
as
people.
humans.
Right.
And
Humans.
I think really we really need that,
We need that.
conversations really help me
Hmm.
personally, because I think we have a human to human connection. um,
Right.
and more of society needs that,
They
frankly.
definitely
That's
do.
my opinion.
And I think also it, like I said, it comes down to being mindful of your speech. And so I caught myself saying something just a minute ago when you were talking about your friend who's Jamaican and Japanese. And I said, wow, that's a lot. And so the thing is, that's not necessarily a bad statement, but it coming out of my mouth, escaping my mouth, going into the air where I can hear what I just said, I
Mhm.
understand that could be taken as offensive. So what I meant by that was to say, Jamaican culture is a very strong culture, and also Japanese culture is a very strong culture
Yeah.
in terms of traditions and thoughts and beliefs. So I just wanted to clarify that. And as a teacher, I also want to model, you know, in a conversation, you can say, wait a minute, did you find offense to what I just said? Because it didn't sound right to me. Maybe it was okay. Maybe it
Yeah.
was fine, but I just want to see what you thought about that. That's how I say I feel like I am a worldwide teacher, not just a teacher of whichever district I'm with, because I have to be brave enough to, stop and reflect on my own words sometimes. And I think if more of us could do this, everybody, not just in the United States or Canada, but everybody in the world, if we could do that, I think we'd just have a different experience as humans.
Yeah, I think that's so admirable for you to be able to actually model, kind of think something.
Sorry.
Oh, you're flipping
Sorry.
here now. But I think it's super admirable that you're able to say something and then kind of reflect and say, like, oh, I had this urge to say this thing, and I'm aware of maybe that being like a little bit like offensive or like, microaggressive. Because I think in reality, in day-to-day interactions, not everyone speaks out against, microaggressive things or things that are taken offensively. So I think it's super admirable. I think it's
Thank
amazing
you.
we're able to kind of reflect on that and think like, oh, well, maybe I should just check in. I frankly wish that
Right.
more people did that in society.
I know.
And maybe
Me too.
yeah,
But I'm
I
seeing
think
in the
it's
comments, I got a lot of thank yous. Thank you, you guys. I think it's SAFI Lynch, Safi Lynch Therapy said, thank you
mhm.
for modeling that. Oh, thank you from a therapist. That's awesome. And Tony Ham said, thank you. Like I said, though, just being brave enough, because honestly, sometimes it's like, wait a minute, should I draw attention to that fact? But I
Mhm.
just think, like I said, we need to start being a little bit more transparent every day, paying attention to our thoughts and just being more mindful as human beings.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even like going back to what we were talking about before with standing up to racist remarks or maybe
Yeah.
family members and friends that do have like racial biases and stuff, it's often so hard to say something about it, especially if it's something that personally damages you. And
Hmm.
I was thinking about this morning, and I was reflecting on, some of the instances of why I hadn't said something in the past. And, some of those reasons are safety. Like I had been
Oh,
called on the street and like walking alone as a woman in a
yes.
different country, for example. Um,
Yes.
but sometimes I feel like there's this impression, this idea that people of color get these messages from society that maybe they're being like oversensitive or maybe they're being irrational for reacting in a certain way. And I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because I think it's really dangerous for these messages to kind of convey like, oh, well, you didn't like the comment, maybe you're just being like too PC, or maybe you're being
Yes.
sorry I hurt your feelings, rather than
Yes. I'm
sorry
sorry.
I said something racist kind of. So
Hmm.
yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about, what you think about that.
Well, I'm going to read the comments really quick, and then you let me know if I didn't answer the question correctly. But Sophie Lynch Therapy said gaslighting. That is a thing.
Yeah,
Y'all look it up. That's
yeah.
and that is the tenet of the racist argument. When a racist engages you in conversation, which turns into argument, the intent is to gaslight you, and you need to know that. We'll go into that another time if we need to. Um, Tony Ham said sometimes we're a bit timid of speaking out against microaggressions because the people who commit them become hypersensitive and hyper defensive about their remarks.
Mm-hmm.
My good friend Nerdy Black Vibes, you can follow him at Nerdy Black Vibes. I had done an interview with him before, said exactly, they are the ones that are so sensitive, but y'all the one, we were talking about reverse racism before, like y'all the one that started racism, then you get mad when we say something about it.
Yeah.
um and then Tony Ham said, I agree. It's the same with women. Men gaslight women and white people gaslight people of color. That is so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So I just love that you said safety. I never even considered that sometimes I don't respond because I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And safety can present itself in a myriad of ways. For instance, I've said before, a lot of white people are wondering why Black people never spoke up, which in some ways their ears were shrouded due to whiteness. They couldn't hear us in the first place. But also, it comes down to, well, geez, it comes down to what I've said before. Our lives have depended on white people not knowing how we truly feel.
Yeah.
And I don't think that everyone, I've said that several times, but I really need everybody to reflect on the weight of that. As a Black person, my life has depended upon white people not knowing how I truly feel about my job, because I could be fired and lose my livelihood.
Hmm. There's a lot at stake.
If I get pulled over, my very life, being alive and retaining life, depends on this white officer who's racist not knowing how I truly feel about him personally and about what he's doing.
Hmm.
So I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of respect for when we encounter these things, and we're focusing on our safety, because in a lot of ways we don't really, especially as Black people, don't realize how that has translated to our survival.
Hmm.
And that this is a survival practice and a survival technique that we're
Yeah.
engaging in.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's definitely my thought on it.
Yeah. Well,
Tony Ham said it's traumatic, and we're traumatized in such a way our brains go into survival mode, hence we don't speak up as much. How does that resonate with you, Laura? Survival mode.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like working in trauma, I hear this all the time, about like racial trauma. I hear it about like domestic violence trauma, just any kind of trauma. It makes a lot of sense biologically. And you might have heard this too, and some of you may have also heard this, the fight, flight, or freeze response.
Yes.
And the
Yes. Fight,
key
flight, or freeze.
I think the key is that people don't realize we can't choose which response we do, right? And so a lot
Yes.
of people think like, oh, this one person, they choose to be aggressive when they're triggered, or this one person, they choose to freeze or run away. We don't actually choose. Our nervous system chooses for us. And
I did not know that.
I really think that that comment makes a lot of sense. When we're triggered, when we are in a state of, feeling traumatized or being traumatized, our brains do go into a survival mode. And that's often why we freeze.
Hmm.
Sometimes we freeze for survival. And that's kind of going back to like our conversation about self-compassion and forgiving ourselves for just reacting in such a way that we look back and we're like, oh, I wish I would have reacted in this way.
Right.
Sometimes our bodies react for us, and our
Right.
nervous system goes into overdrive, and we really
Hmm.
have to forgive ourselves for that, right? So yeah,
Yeah, we
I
do.
think that that comment makes a lot of sense there.
Well, I saw let's see. Uh somebody oh, Miss Tea Leaf said, so true. As a person with DID, I do that all the time. I run away. She said she's Jamaican and she has DID. Do you know what DID is?
Yeah, it's dissociative
Thank you.
identity disorder.
It's
Um,
what?
Dissociative identity disorder.
Okay, okay.
So it's historically, in the past, it has been called multiple personality disorder. A
Okay.
lot of people think of it as, like, I think in mainstream media, it's thought of it as having multiple or split personalities. But in recent research, not even just recently, but like in the last like 10, 15 years, we've realized that DID is not just split personalities, but it can manifest in so many different ways. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, DID does come from trauma. And there has been research that's shown that, racial trauma, for example, or hate crimes, like they can all manifest this splitting. We talk about kind of splitting between like ourselves and reality. That sometimes happens as a traumatic response too. So yeah, I think the key is just really realizing what our reactions are, because in a lot of instances we can't be aware of our reactions before they happen.
Right.
Our bodies are designed in such ways to protect ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that splitting, one type of dissociation, for example, is, and I spoke about this in the context of sexual assault, um,
Yeah.
is when our brains protect ourselves and split, like people basically lose their memory of the assault or the traumatic
Yes.
thing that's
Yes.
happened. That can be also understand when our brains split off like the reality of what's happened and our memory. And it does that because it doesn't want the psychological consequences of, the traumatic event on our brains and on our bodies.
Right. Right.
Yeah, those things are really common. And this is why it's so important to talk about racism, to
Mhm.
talk about like where these behaviors come from, because I think you can't actually combat trauma fully until you prevent the trauma from happening in the first place, right?
Right.
And
Right.
clinicians and mental health workers and people can try to heal all they want, and try to really pursue like psychotherapy or medication or other practices that they do to heal from trauma. But if trauma is going to happen over and over again, like what's happening now, in America with the police, if it happens over and over
Yes.
again, how can you fully heal from that trauma? I
What
don't.
you're saying is so amazing, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I feel like I've gotten better. I talk so much. Like when I'm giving interviews, I'm like, be quiet and listen to what people are saying. But I'm
Oh,
sorry.
love
I
it
did
though.
this interview with KP The Experience just this past Tuesday, and I said exactly what you're saying. When we talk about growth mindset, one of your therapists or clinician friends or somebody in that group of people said, we have to stop expecting for children in inner cities to just develop a growth mindset when
Yeah.
they are bombarded by these behaviors every single day. And on that show with KP Experience, I said, Black men are so unlikely to get therapy in the first place because of the cultural issues of you don't put your business out in the street, number one. Number two, as you and I discussed last week, there are foundations, systemic foundations of racism within those institutions. So you're telling me to get over it. I don't have the tools to get over it,
Yeah.
and it keeps happening. How do I ever heal? Tell
Yeah.
me that.
Yeah.
You racist white person that's telling me this. How do I ever heal? How do I get over it?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of telling me
Mm-hmm.
to go to Africa, tell me how to get over it, because that doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
the person who's a racist needs to be involved in that stupid loop themselves. That makes no sense. There is no healing because things continue happening daily. On the daily something happens.
Absolutely.
On
Yeah.
the daily something happens where I have to be worried about my 20-year-old son, or my very dark-skinned husband, or myself, or my son in the school system every single day. So when do
Yeah.
I get an opportunity to heal, and where would I go to do that? How long? I don't get a chance to go to rehab in Malibu or anything like that to heal. I
Yeah.
have to incorporate it into my day. And some people would say, I don't have time for that. But we're coming to a point now where we don't have time not to.
Yeah, yeah. But I think you bring up a really good point, because I think in a lot of instances, healing is like a privilege that people afford, right? And
Yes.
this is my
Yes.
frustration with the mental health system that exists in North America and frankly all over the world, is because I think mental health care should be a right that people have. And I
Yes.
think that what logistically makes sense, if governments believe that mental health care is a right, is that it should be free. I think healthcare should
Exactly.
be free and subsidized by the government, just like, for example, in Canada, healthcare is, but not mental health care.
Mm,
I think that, yeah, it should be a right and not a privilege to be able to pay like hundreds of dollars to go to,
exactly.
for example. And
Exactly.
the fact that like therapy can be preventative care as well as an interventive care as well. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with the fact, like, how can we heal from trauma when trauma is happening over and over again in our society? And how can we make healing accessible for people in all cultures, in all socioeconomic kind of positions in life?
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so we have about a minute left, and I do want to say that I'm really glad that I did this on my other Instagram account, because now, even though it's backwards, we can see what people said. And
Oh,
as a teacher, you get all kinds of writing, so I know how to read backwards and upside down. So I'll tell you
wow,
what they said. Okay, girl.
that's super handy.
I
Nice.
know, right? So I'm like really glad we came across this.
Yeah.
So come back next week. we're here every Sunday at 1. If something happens, we'll definitely let you know.
Mhm.
Feel free to inbox me, inbox Laura. I saw a couple of really good suggestions down there. So we'll consider those for future shows. But more than anything, I want to say thank you for joining us. And we ended this way last time. I think we should do it again. This means I love you in
I
sign
love
language. So even if you can't hear my voice, you can know that I love you.
it. Aw.
Bye.
All right, lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.